degree of Master Mason. Nearly 5 years being God's attention for his Masonic.
You can add Sophia to that now.
Oh, Fox.
Yeah.
Last one is multiple lodges. Tracing board process completed his second. He's the first American ambassador in the Association of Masonic Arts and has a fiction. Yeah, all right, I think I've pronounced most of the words in that thing.
Yep. I'm saying you could put Sophia in there now.
That's right. Can you hear good?
I can hear great.
Stand alone.
This is the music. This is the exact music my boss doesn't like me listen to in my office.
You're with us right now,
yeah.
David, so we're just going to roll with it. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Sean, you ready back there?
I'm ready.
We're very pleased to have with us today Brother Ryan Flynn. Brother Flynn was raised with a sublime degree of Master Mason in 2010. In the nearly 5 years of being a Mason, Brother Flynn has gained worldwide attention for his Masonic art and patents. Having sold his work on 6 continents, he has produced paintings, drawings, and designed faux stained glass windows for multiple lodges. Recently, he completed his first tracing board and is in the process of... All right. Recently, he completed... All right, Sean's going to fix this. Recently, he completed his first tracing board and is in the process of completing his second. You put completed his second.
Oh, see, I messed it up.
You messed it up,
yeah,
man. I was like, what?
I told you, I can paint anything on the wall, but you asked me to write something. You're going to need 3 or 4 checks. Don't even get me into math.
That's right. He is the first American ambassador to the Association of Masonic Arts and has had his work featured in publications such as Living Stones Magazine. Have to put some applause in there when we get to that. Working Tools, and has been featured on the cover of Philadelphia Society Journal multiple times. Ryan frequently speaks on the importance of the promotion and discussion of the fine arts and Freemasonry, and has recently been described as one of the most influential Masonic artists in the world. In addition to all that, as of yesterday, he has been made an honorary member of Sophia Lodge number 767, located in Salisbury, North Carolina. Ryan flew down on Friday, picked him up at the airport, and we hung out. Saturday, we went to Sophia Lodge, where he did a presentation for us. Actually did 2 presentations. Wonderful job on the presentations. And here's what I'm going to tell you about Ryan and his presentations. There's a new rising star on the national level speaker scene, and it's Ryan Flynn. And he really knocked our socks off, both with the material and with his delivery. For you guys that have funded national level speaker programs, you absolutely must include this man right here. Ryan, how are you, brother?
I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you for being here. Sean has things on the board back there, buddy.
Oh, very good.
Okay, so for you guys that watch the Masonian podcast, this is kind of the same setup. We're in the same place, the tractor shed. These people are kind enough to let us use this for a makeshift studio. But Riley's not here. Riley's our co-host on the Masonian. Just worked out that way. And this is another series that Sean and I are going to do, which is just interviews with artists, or with national level guys, or even local guys that we do. So it's kind of like the Masonian, only exactly different. We use different music, even better music maybe. Anyway, Ryan, we're awful glad to have you here. Why don't you tell us how it is that you got to be an artist before a Masonic artist? How did you get into art?
You know, I was always the art geek in high school. I was joking with you a couple days ago about I didn't really study that art in high school. The only thing I really put my full attention into was art. I was lucky enough to go to a private school that had a great art department. So my teacher, Chip Vandenberg, would let me get into different mediums like stained glass, mosaics, sculpture, drawing, and he had this. It was a Christian high school, and he always said, do art for the sake of God, or do art for sake of a deeper meaning. because that's what makes you stand out. And I kind of took that to heart. So after leaving LCA, my high school, jumped around a little bit and ended up in UMass, and that's where I majored in graphic design and fine arts, and with a minor in art history. And in 2006, I decided to study abroad for a summer, and studied in Florence, Italy, which I'm still paying for, but I'm happy to pay for it.
I can only imagine. So was that experience as good as I can imagine?
Oh, it was awesome. I studied at the University of Richmond, who had a satellite campus there, and they set us up in this apartment overlooking the Arno River. We had a studio down near. I thought you wanted
that's for you to tap your fingers on.
Oh, okay. I thought
it makes quite a racket when we do this. Listen.
There you go.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you just wanted me to
it's going to drive Sean crazy. It's going to drive Sean crazy on the board back there.
Yeah, it's just a cute picture of a puppy. I think you just wanted to share it with me. But I got a studio there. The schedule was not oppressive. They really wanted you to appreciate it. So I took art history and painting over there, and it was just awesome. Just engrossed in art for a summer. So.
Why Florence? Why not Rome or one of the others?
Florence traditionally, it's where the Renaissance started, and with the history of Michelangelo, Brunelleschi.
Oh no, we don't know about that. Why don't you tell us?
Oh, okay. Well, as we were discussing yesterday, Florence was this cultural melting pot. And with the schools of the Medici schools started by Cosimo, it's almost parallels to Freemasonry, because as we were discussing, it was the first time that we had, Hermetic knowledge and Kabbalah put together into one spot. And, you can argue that's Freemasonry right there. And the way they promoted it was through the arts. So, it was very important to the Medici to bring in artists that would eat up this knowledge and put it into their work. So they funded, the architect Brunelleschi, who did the Dome in Florence.
Before we go to the Dome, because I know you want to talk about that extensively.
Yeah.
But let's talk just a little bit about the school and the family.
Yeah.
So Italy at the time had little city-states, right? And Florence was one of them. Mm-hmm. And the Medici, Cosmo, well, I guess his whole family for several generations in front of and behind him, but he's kind of the one that, you correct me where I go wrong here, he's the one that did the most for the arts in this school that his family ran.
Yeah, well, Cosmo really started the whole thing. It's good to have money, and it's good to have rich people owe you money, I guess. So he lent out a lot of money and started a banking family that soon became the richest family in Europe. And the way that separated him, I guess, from a lot of people was he'd had this opportunity for people to learn, and he had, his schools and his library that he'd let people come in. But what he would do to share it was he would take in these artists and make them study it. He gave them these opportunities. For example, Michelangelo, he was doing a little project in a school, and Lorenzo, who was his grandson, gave him a little advice. Hey, why don't you knock a tooth off? This guy would make him look older, and he did. And they realized that he was a listener, and put him in touch with some people. And Michelangelo is a perfect example, because he got all this knowledge, and if you look at his work, it's all in there. It's not obvious, but if you study the esoteric stuff, and then look at the Sistine Chapel, or look at even David or Moses, and you just look at how things are put together, you see this really cool narrative of forbidden knowledge in there, and I ate that stuff up.
So just historically, I don't know the answer to this. Were they running the school of philosophy at the same time obviously at the same time that they were promoting all these artists? So was there like cross-pollination of ideas there?
I believe so. You can't deny that it was there. If you look at the artists they funded and see what they do. Before the Renaissance, painters in the Christian world painted Christian stuff. What do you paint? You paint Jesus in this form, you paint Mary in another form, and that's what you did. And then you look at Florence, and you have artists like Botticelli, who's all of a sudden painting the birth of Venus, or the Primavera, the allegory of spring. And you're looking at this, and this isn't Christian work, and it's fully embracing it. And that's kind of what set the Renaissance apart, where people were producing stuff that wasn't the cultural norm, and it was outside the box, and it's stuff that made people uncomfortable, but they still produced it, repetitively. So Florence was very special because it was that one place where that was allowed to happen.
Don't worry about this. I'm trying to keep my time right.
Yep.
So we can keep an idea when we're going to be there. Okay, press on.
So that's why I chose Florence. I knew it was special. I just knew there was a lot in the same area. I had traveled to Italy once before with my wife's family. They did this gigantic, 50 members of her extended family went to Italy. Saw Rome, saw how busy Rome is. Seems like one big rotary. But Florence hit me real quick. I only had seen the David. I saw the Duomo there. And I knew there was a lot more. Michelangelo's villa was there and all this other stuff. So I knew that was where I wanted to go. And I'm lucky, too, because, I was there for summer. I still haven't seen everything in that city. Everything's new. And they embrace art so much over there. It's the complete opposite of America today, where, there's even festivals based around public works of art that I've seen.
It's wonderful.
And as an artist, I'm home. And I consider Florence my second home, even though I've only been there.
It's almost like you were going to Medici's school.
Yeah, it really is.
Were you close to it geographically? Were you staying in the city?
I stayed I was right in the heart of the city, in the Palazzo Vecchio is the main building. The Palazzo Medici's on the other side. It's probably like a mile and a half away, but definitely went in there and walked around a couple times.
It's great stuff. Tell us, so just tell us a little bit about being there and your experience with your art teachers when you were there, and then we're going to talk about the food.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about the food. I had a great teacher who taught art history, and he knew some people. So he kind of got us into a couple of places that I've tried to get in when I went there alone. It just didn't happen. But he just knew his stuff, and he was passionate about it. Everybody loved him in the class. So my art appreciation class was awesome because it wasn't in a classroom. We had our final test was in the class, and the introduction was in the classroom, and everywhere else we're like, no, we're going to go look at this today. So I got to see Da Vinci's in person. I got to see Michelangelo's in person. He told me one of the funny stories I have with him is we were going in to see David, and when you go in to see Michelangelo's David, they have all these things called the captives, which are unfinished works that are just figures starting to come out of the stone. And Peter, the teacher, he grabs my hand, sticks it on one of them. He goes, "Oh, you have to touch Michelangelo to understand it." And I'm like, "No, I do not, sir."
I might break it.
Yeah, I don't. I'll be that guy, But it wasn't so much. I learned a lot of facts, and it was an excellent teacher. We learned a lot of facts, but it was that appreciation of art that took me to the next level. You're in a place where it's just embraced, and there's parts of America. I've grown up, in a family with my aunt, and I always go to art museums, and we, love every minute of it and appreciate art. But outside of that, it's not as soaked up as it is over there. It's a completely different way of looking at things,
and it's so old.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. We think of 1700s as old, and 1700s, that's new over there. That's when the last paint job went on it. When you hear about stuff that, this was made 2,000 years ago, you're, okay, when Jesus was walking the earth, this was old,
Yeah. Okay, so at the same time that they had the school going on and they were promoting the artists, they also had this dome. Tell us about the dome. I pointed to it because he drew it on my blackboard. Maybe we'll get a picture of it somehow in the program here.
I was hooked on this building the first time I saw it, and I didn't realize it. I was really learning about Freemasonry when it was built. The story goes, and this is an extremely simplified story. There's a great book called Brunelleschi's Dome by Ross. I can't think of his first name. Ross King. I'm sorry. he goes over the whole building of it. But basically, this artist left Florence after losing a competition and went to Rome. We know he went to Rome and studied how buildings were done back there. And he learned somewhere in the 16 years that he disappeared some other stuff, building ideas that came from the East, maybe like Mesopotamia area. And he comes back and figures out a way to build this dome on this church that people wanted to put the dome on the church, but they didn't know how to, so they left this gigantic hole there for 85 years. And through a competition, he won the commission to build this dome, and Cosimo Medici was one of the guys who was on there. And you could definitely tell that there was an influence made, because you get the richest guy in town to agree to something, you usually get it done. But what I was learning about it was that these similarities, these secrets that wouldn't be passed on to the wrong people. The way they met in the church, the way he organized his building process, and then the use of just sheer knowledge to do it. He built the dome without any scaffolding or centering device, just using math and processes we still don't understand today. Instead of building one dome, he built two domes, so one building supported the other dome as it was built up, and he built it straight up. Yeah, he also invented machines, like the first reversible hoist, so that oxen would walk in a circle and then raise up a brick, but through some gears, he wouldn't have to switch the direction of the oxen, and it sped up production quite a bit. He was, one of the first guys to really worry about builder safety. Harnesses were used. There was very few deaths in that time era in building something that big. It's incredible. And
tell the story about when he walked off the job.
Oh yeah, there's this one of the funnier stories about him, and I'm simplifying this. He had a big time rival, I guess you could say, in Florence, and he always used to say he's going to kill everybody. This thing's going to fall over. So he kind of got let go at one point, and when building stopped working correctly and things weren't coming into place, people went back to him and said, like, "Wow, are you going to fix this?" And miraculously, Brunelleschi would be on his deathbed all of a sudden, getting his last rites, preparing for the end. Oh. And as soon as he got rehired to fix it, the most miraculous recovery in medical history happens, and he's back on the job getting things done. But it was interesting because his builders and his wardens who worked with him, like they were so loyal to him. And in reading King's book, you get a real sense of that. He even mentions the Freemasons in it because of the Masonic secrets and stuff, things that didn't get passed out of that clique. And
you mentioned that his helpers were called wardens?
Yeah, so he was called a Campomistro, which is master builder in Italian. But the translation, and I can't think of it right now off the top of my head, the translation for the people as subordinates could be translated as wardens or chieftains or something like that. I really apologize. I can't think of the name of it. But
you had a rough night, Lance.
Yeah. But Ross King gets into that, and he's talking about how there's a little bit of a similarity. The Freemasons are a footnote in the book, but after I've become a Freemason, I read it again, and I realized these similarities. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning about Freemasonry, just not with that name.
So we were talking the other day about the fact that not only were there a lot of similarities to Freemasonry from that particular part of it, from the dome, and that workmanship and that crew of workers and stuff, but also the whole idea of the school, kind of brought back a whole renaissance of its own of enlightened thinking that flourished for a while and then, of course, went back underground, but then resurfaced. It disappears and resurfaces throughout history, time after time. But an awful lot of what could be, this is all speculation, of course, but certainly a lot of ideas that would go along with speculative Freemasonry today can be traced back, at least in part, to that time.
Yeah, I can't believe it's a coincidence. It just seems like the perfect fit. It was just this great group of people just collecting knowledge. and then promoting it, not just collecting it, but embracing it and not hiding it, which was a big thing back then. To publicly say you're talking about Hermeticism, when the Catholic Church was the rule of the day.
In the Kabbalah.
Yep, and Kabbalah is
that had come out of Spain.
Yeah. It's crazy. You think about what they were doing to other people who didn't believe in what the church said you had to believe in, and the guts of these guys to do this was incredible.
And then probably the thing that they were thinking at the time was going to be stand the test of time more than anything was the dome, or was the church.
Yeah,
and so that's all revolves around the building trade and architecture, and then you have all this alternative philosophy at the same time. And, those are all things that we include in Freemasonry.
Absolutely. Like I said, you can't tell me it's a coincidence.
We're just incubated right now.
Just need to build more domes.
Build more domes. All right, good. So before we leave Florence, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Like I said, it's just this, what I talked to my presentation is building something like the dome, or even that's an extreme example. People used artwork, this idea of public art, statues, fountains, built all over the place because it was a show of appreciation to the people, and it was also like a calling card. Art became a symbol of the people, and it's celebrated to this day. You go to certain towns in Italy, and they have festivals based around artwork, or based around a fountain, or something that really the inhabitants of that region clearly identify with. And it's that lost art appreciation that Freemasonry or any other organization can really embrace and bring back.
Yeah, you talked about this extensively yesterday in your presentation, and we talked about how much the culture seems to be watered down these days, and anything of richness or depth seems to be almost poo-pooed as it's I don't know, it's not for the common man. If you are into any of the arts, it just seems like that puts you on a pedestal and makes you somehow elite or exclusive, and that the common people, just normal folks, can't have an appreciation for that kind of art. I don't know what's happened culturally to make it that way.
It's a tragedy because, as I was saying, art can really bring people together, and it's really powerful. And then that thought process has disappeared in my mind. Unfortunately, with the end of the 20th century, early 21st century here, art has become so monetary based that people see it more as, well, what am I getting in return? Well, what you're getting in return, you can't place a price on.
Right.
And that concept is there's stuff out there, there's concepts, there's feelings out there that don't bring you money in your pocket, but they're just as important. And that's kind of gone out. And it's a shame, because if we put energy into promoting the arts, we're going to, like you said, it gives you the sense of, if you want to say elitism, or just importance, or higher stature, if you will. If we, especially Freemasons, if we started doing that again, to use the A word, it's an advertisement to an organization that promotes excellence. And
if anybody ought to understand this, it ought to be the Freemasons.
Absolutely. To not mince words here, if you have apathy of Freemasonry, and you turn it into a social club, you can't. Why promote a social club in this way? So maybe that's the reason there's a decline in it. There's been a decline in Masonry. You can't deny it.
See, we make you. What happens, Ryan, is we make you honorary member of Sophia.
Yeah, now
and all of a sudden you're a neo-ancient, as John Palmer would call you. You're a TO guy through and through.
Yeah,
so we've corrupted you.
Yeah,
you're ruined.
I wasn't in a
Save
TO.
yourself now.
Yeah, right. Just tell my wife it's another night away. I'm not in a TO lodge.
Is Yes, you are.
Well, I am now. Up until yesterday, I wasn't in a TO lodge, but my lodge, Ancient New York Lodge in Nashua, New Hampshire, is an education-driven lodge, and we're getting noticed for it. Some dear friends of mine are members of the TO Lodge in New Hampshire, Phoenix Lodge, and I visit it frequently. I love the experience there. I want to bring a lot of that into my lodge. I know there's a general I shouldn't say anti-TO lodge movement, but our feeling in the air. But I think there's a lot of people who don't understand it or have heard the wrong versions of what it is. You know, they hear elitism, they hear high dues to keep the poor people out, and this is stuff I hear. But you know, it's going to take a while. But people need to realize, people my age, and I'll generalize a little bit here. People my age do not want to join a social club. If you're going to go out there and tell me it makes good men better, or it's the greatest fraternity in all of history, and I go there and, you know, a cookout is the biggest thing you do all year, you're not going to stay. I wouldn't want to join either. I almost left Freemasonry myself until actually a TO guy threw a book at me and said, you know, here, chew on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
And his name was Jack Kanan. He's since passed away, but he's the guy who kept me in Freemasonry. And there's a handful of other guys who really said, no, there's something more here. Just deal with it and figure it out, and we'll help you on your way. And once you get to that point when you start to realize how much is in there, the two things happen for me. You kind of realize it's up to you to fix it. And for me, it was also, look at how much motivation there is in here, and how much, what can I do with art with this? And that's what really set me off as a Masonic artist, because once you start digging in, it's just all stuff I want to paint.
You know, everybody that's of a TO mindset, or is, you know, a neo-ancient, as John would call them. A great article that John Palmer wrote in Knight Templar magazine that talks about this. So I'm gonna throw him a bone and promote that a little bit. It was in the issue before last. They have a website. You can go see that on the website. But everybody that, you know, thinks the way that we do has that same experience. Almost to the man, every one of them has this experience where they were disillusioned with Masonry. It wasn't what they thought it was. They were just about to quit or give up, or at least quit coming and participating. And some guy got a hold of them and said, here, read this book. Here, think about this. Do this program. Think about this in a different light. Come to this TO Lodge and see an alternative way to look at Freemasonry. And the lesson in that is that we, as those guys, are now, I won't say that we're the wise old guys, because we haven't been around that long, but we need to be those leaders that when you see a kid or a young Mason that's struggling, you know, with a system that he's in, that you be a mentor for him, and throw a book at him, invite him to a TO Lodge, you know, and invite him to, you know, show him that there's another way. And so many times I think the guys that are in our lodge almost feel like until they become some sort of ascended master and figure out everything, that they they don't have the moxie, the props to, you know, preach this way of doing things, to proselytize for this way of doing things. And they need to get over that. We got to all turn around and help the guys behind us. Yeah, I mean, we're off on TO, but I don't know how we got away from that.
No, we'll get back to it, because I can tie it right back. Two things I'd say to that is, one, every one of us has our own talents. You know, I'm an artist. You know, that's my thing. So that's how I can give back to Freemasonry. You know, in New Hampshire, you know, the first degree, you're charged at the end of it, and then that charge says you've been given talents by God, and it's your duty to use them. So what better way to do it? And, you know, if someone's passionate about music, you know, like yourself, you're passionate about cooking. There's a way in there somewhere to give back to Masonry. And it can be the smallest thing, but it's yours, and go with it, and just go as best as you can with it. And as we're saying with passing that knowledge back, going back to Florence, you know, Cosimo Medici and that library, they collected all that knowledge. That's great. You know, everybody can collect knowledge, but they passed it on. And that's the important thing. What's the point of being the smartest person in the room if you don't tell anybody anything you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Masonic artists in general and Masonic art in general. You had a lot of this in your presentation yesterday, and especially that idea that you were talking about, like a community or a nation or a group of people rallying around something. You had a lot of examples. Why don't you just talk about some that people would recognize right off the bat, made by Masons for Masons?
Yeah, well, I mean, the absolute best example of Masonic art is the Statue of Liberty. And I mentioned in my presentation, if you think about it, it's a crazy concept. Millions and millions of people whose first impression at arriving in New York Harbor was seeing the work of a Freemason. That symbolizes a concept such as liberty. And, if you think about what it said on it, bring me your poor, your tired, your weak, we accept everybody. That's a Masonic thought. We accept everybody into our lodge as long as you believe in God. And it doesn't even we don't even get into further. I love that aspect of it. We have people of every faith in our lodge.
Flesh that out just a little bit, because, just to get up on our high horse here just a minute, we say that as a nation, and we say that as Freemasons, and most of us believe it, but there's a lot of, I don't want to get off on national politics, but there's a lot of people that are opposed to letting people of other nations immigrate here. There's also in the lodge a lot of people that say that they accept everybody, but we still have a lot of states that don't recognize Prince Hall. And I'm going to suggest that they're probably preaching one thing but practicing another.
Absolutely.
And I don't like it.
It really bums me out when I hear about that kind of stuff, because using Facebook as an example, because it's just such an easy way to contact brothers everywhere. I have a couple brothers on Facebook who are Muslim. They're from another part of the state. I never would have met them, never would have talked to them, but we talk about the same stuff we talk about philosophy together, and I love hearing their aspects of it. And I even come out and say it. I say, I want to hear your thoughts on this as a Muslim, just because I want to know what you're bringing. I want that aspect that takes me out of my comfort zone and bring it to the table, because we can all learn from each other.
That's right.
And Freemasonry is just, it's so special because it provides you that opportunity. With the Prince Hall stuff, I'm kind of lucky where, I'm up in New Hampshire and in New England. We're pretty accepting of all that stuff. So it really didn't come up, and I didn't really understand the problem until I found out that someone I was talking to wasn't recognized because they weren't recognized from another Grand Lodge. It's petty. It's stuff that should not be happening.
It is, and I would just let me bounce this off of you. I think that that as artists, isn't it true that artists usually are out front of society on issues like this? Obviously, the Statue of Liberty, is one example, but they push boundaries. Artists push boundaries,
Absolutely.
Don't they?
They should. If you're an artist, you have kind of a free license to do that.
Our musicians do it as well as regular artists.
You can look at. You can't take it literally. They're not going to go out there and, just paint something that's blatantly race related. But you can put concepts into your art, and, even without race, you look at music and how it evolves and how it takes aspects of other cultures and brings it into it. An easy example, it's not really Masonic, but, the Beatles bringing in the, music from, India and all that stuff, just intertwining it with their music. That's a way of embracing all their cultures, and you can do it through art. And it's this great medium, no matter writing, fine art, music. It's all, you can always do it.
And which leads us right into the idea that artists oftentimes will hide something in plain sight.
Yeah,
and so they can be thumbing. They can do something. Talk to us about the Vatican and examples of how artists sometimes thumb their nose at the establishment right under their nose. They don't even know it.
Well, you can literally right under their noses. The best example. It's my guy, Michelangelo. It sounds like a cop-out when people ask me, like, who's your favorite artist? And Michelangelo's up there for me. And it's not just because I like his pretty pictures. It's the guts this guy had and what he put in there. Many people know that Michelangelo and the papacy really didn't get along. the Pope who commissioned him to the Sistine Chapel ceiling originally commissioned him to do his tomb. And this tomb was going to be like the greatest work of art ever. He leveled old St. Peter's Basilica because his tomb wouldn't fit in it. And then he built what we now know as St. Peter's instead. Ironically, that tomb never was built there. It was built across town. But Michelangelo was promised that he was a sculptor. He wasn't a painter. And he was promised this giant commission, and when he was about to really get working on it, the Pope said, "No, I got a ceiling for you to paint," which is just like, are you kidding me? So Michelangelo definitely realized he had an opportunity here to make his feelings known, but not in an obvious way. So if you think about the Sistine Chapel, it was supposed to have scenes of Christ's life and all this Christian art put onto the ceiling, but he never painted one Christian figure on the ceiling. He painted the Old Testament. He put a lot of Kabbalah into it. One of the prime examples is the expulsion from paradise. You have Adam and Eve about to take the fruit, then you have a serpent and an angel throwing him out and then walking away. But Adam and Eve aren't eating an apple tree, which is the traditional representation of the fruit, tree of knowledge and the fruit of knowledge. They're in a fig tree, and in Kabbalah, it's known to be a fig tree because it teaches that God gives you a problem and a solution in each activity, I guess you could say. The problem was they ate from the tree of knowledge and they gained knowledge and realized they were naked, but they used the same fig tree to cover themselves up. So that's just very, very basic, and you can get so deep with that I don't understand it completely, but he puts that in there. My favorite thing he puts in, or two favorite things, right where the main door of the Sistine Chapel was, Jesus was supposed to be over it. So Michelangelo paints Zechariah instead. And Zechariah, a lot of the book of Zechariah talks about the corrupt church. And warns the priesthood to obey God and stuff. So Zechariah gets the Pope's face on it, and the Pope didn't have the greatest eyesight, but he saw it, he recognized who it was, and you got to remember this is pretty high up off the ground. But what the Pope couldn't see is right behind his head, there's two cherubs in there. They're holding their hands like this, which is called biting the fig, which is the equivalent of us flipping each other off. So as you walk into the Sistine Chapel, there's two angels flipping off the Pope right over your head.
Well, he's lucky he didn't get slow roasted.
Yeah, he would have gotten in trouble for that one.
Oh. And so they did this all the time.
Yeah.
Hiding things in plain sight, especially during the Italian Renaissance.
Yeah, the High Renaissance and something called Mannerism, which is a style where, every little thing means something. A hand gesture could be pointing to something. Like you see a lot of hands pointing, and if you follow the finger, it goes to something else. John the Baptist and Leonardo da Vinci's version, he's pointing up, and people go, why is he pointing up? But, what could that mean? He's pointing to the cross and maybe something beyond. It's all up to interpretation, but you got to realize these guys were thinking on multiple levels here. These are some of the smartest people of their time. That if there's something in there, it's on purpose.
You talk just a little bit about what some of the symbols mean. I was talking to you last night, and I'd like for you to have fleshed that out more. You talk about 8 always represents like eternity, and just talk about some of the different symbols and what they always mean, so that we lay people can look for them.
There's so much out there, and that it's hard to say. But for example, 8. A lot of numbers meant a lot of stuff back then. Even in the Bible, numbers have a lot of specific meaning that people don't really take for granted when they first see it. 8 has typically represented eternity or going away. The example I use is even the Beatles, going back to the Beatles, 8 days a week. So it's more than what's expected. Even when you turn the 90 degrees, it becomes the infinity symbol. So a lot of buildings that house specific, let me backtrack, like baptistries. Baptistries in Italy are separate buildings from the church where people were baptized in. And because if you weren't baptized, you weren't allowed to go to the church. A lot of these baptistries have 8 sides because you're being baptized and it's an eternal blessing. So you see that in architecture a little bit. Then you see ratios, like phi, pi, the Vesica Pisces gets thrown into all this stuff, and it's all very intentional. And the great builders embraced it, and all of a sudden, the movement of the planets all of a sudden become a rose window, or instead of doing random geometric patterns on the floor and the tile, you see Kabbalah, or you see Solomon's seal, and these geometrical patterns have very specific meanings, and most people just walk all over them. They don't understand it, but if someone studies it, or if you're in Freemasonry, you're going to start seeing stuff that you've never noticed before.
Right. And so the artists pick it up right away from other artists.
I think so. One of the things that traveling to Florence really got me is do something on multiple levels. Don't just paint something that means something. And I think after traveling in Italy and really looking at art way too much, you start to see that pattern, and it's really motivating if you're an artist yourself.
And you use this in your art also.
Yeah, I always like to hide stuff in it.
So let's talk about your art. Let's talk about how you went from being just an artist to being a Masonic artist.
Well, oddly enough, after I came back from Italy, I painted through college, and when I graduated, I really stopped painting for a while. It was really, didn't have the room, didn't have the time, fresh out of college, just getting married, had to pay bills, save up for a house type thing. But when I got into Freemasonry, it's kind of lit a fire under my butt, and I haven't stopped yet. My first Masonic artwork was actually thrown at me, and I wasn't expecting it to happen. There was some fake stained glass windows that were going to be done in our lodge in Nashua, and they were going to put these just generic things up there. They had no meaning to it. It had a little fleur-de-lis on it, and I was lucky enough to get put in front of the person making that decision, and I said, "Listen, I'm doing this, and please let me do this." And he did. So in a little over a month, I designed these matching stained glass windows, one representing operative masonry, one representing speculative, and I put a ton of number theory into it. Certain parts of a circle had 32 parts alluding to Scottish Rite, and then there's a 33rd somewhere else in it. The angles that I used were based off of 3, 5, and 7. And I put a lot of thought into it. And when we unveiled it, I think I hit a crowd a little bit there, because it was the first time I think a lot of these people heard an artist talk about what goes into art and realized that when I do something, or I guess they could realize that if I'm doing something, it's not just I'm making a pretty picture. I'm putting a lot of thought in my head to what's going out there before I even start. I'm one of those people who stare at a blank canvas for a while until something hits, then I go and
the lesson they're supposed to get out of that is that when they view your art, they're supposed to think about more than just a pretty picture, right?
Exactly. That's what I hope. And what I do in my presentations when I go to lodges and talk is I'm not the only person who does that. I'm not breaking any rules here. This is old time art. This is what it used to be like all the time. So if you think about all the details I talk about my stuff, there's 10 times more. Those guys were a lot smarter than me. So look at their art and really try to appreciate what you're seeing. In yesterday's presentation, I started off with 2 paintings. Just look at them. We're going to talk about them. And I like to think that it's kind of like how a vocalist warms up their vocal cords. They're getting ready to use their voice to sing. When you look at art and you really start talking about it, you don't have to go crazy about it. You don't have to have a PhD in art history, but you do a little research and just lead a conversation in lodge before you get into your stuff. You're warming up your minds to think on that other level. Like there's more than what's in front of me, and that's Freemasonry. So hopefully some lodges will give that a try, because I really do recommend it. It's great. And you can pick any work of art you see out there. I mean, I'm particular to Italian Renaissance just because I know it. But, there's artists, even look at, for American artists, look at Norman Rockwell. There's so much stuff in his paintings that are not just pretty people eating dinner over the table. There's a lot of stuff in there. Yeah.
I never thought about that with Rockwell. Let's talk about some more of your stuff. So you did the stained glass windows.
Yep, they were.
And I especially want you to talk about this Codex series, but anything else that you want to?
Yeah, the windows.
This is just us promoting you, buddy.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm always nervous about talking about myself too.
You can do it.
Yeah, I'll give it a try. So I was really shocked. I did the windows and I got noticed. Like, people were talking about it. It was shared all over Facebook, and it got on a couple of magazine covers, and I was blown away. And I realized, like, why is this so important? What people are saying, like, you got to do more of this. And I realized that it's only like a handful of Masonic artists left. There's probably like 4 or 5 in America right now. There's a few in Europe. That I consider probably the best Masonic artist is a brother from, I believe he's German or Dutch, Jens Rush. If you go online and look at his stuff, it's incredible.
How you spell it?
Jensruch, I think. I'm sorry if that's wrong.
Facebook? Is he on Facebook?
He's on Facebook.
Okay.
He's a professional artist. He has a school that he teaches, I think. I see pictures of him in class teaching artwork, and does these really, really cool geometrical paintings. Really, really neat stuff. Very, very out there. And I highly recommend it. If you want to talk about a work of art in Lodge, pick one of his.
Well, we will check that out.
Yeah.
Pitch some of the other guys in America. Juan Sepulveda.
Yep.
Sorry, Juan, if I messed that up.
I apologize to Juan. Yeah, what he said, Juan.
I think that's right.
Juan does these great abstract paintings. They're I call them geometrical landscapes. Where he's using shapes instead of for subjects, and they convey Masonic degrees and stuff. They're really, really cool stuff. You got to check it out. He's the complete opposite of me with painting. He's very controlled, fine brush strokes. I look like an idiot when I paint. I'm slapping brushes against canvas and stuff, but you can tell he's taken the time and effort, and his line work is incredible.
And he's on Facebook for sure.
He's
you can
on
pick
Facebook.
him up off either my page or
he also has the Winding Stairs podcast.
Yeah.
And he's also on the Masonic Roundtable, too.
Yes.
It's another podcast. Great guy, loves masonry. You listen to him talk, he knows what he's talking about. There's a brother that I've never met, but I consider a friend, Chad Mesteler, who's out of Jersey. I believe he works as he works in stained glass, but I think he does stained glass painting now, which is a really, really cool process that I only got to try once. And his work is really good, and he loves art. He talks about it. He has like 5 or 6 Facebook pages all promoting art, architecture on Facebook, and he's just spreading the word of Masonic art. It's great.
As the TO movement is really just in its incipient phase in America, I think that the whole idea of Masonic art goes hand in hand with it. It's about that richness of experience, and that leads you it's the handmaiden to art almost. And so I think that the Masonic art movement, is never going to be huge, but it's certainly going to grow right along with the TO movement. I think we're like first cousins.
Yeah, well, I said it I ended my presentation with it yesterday. If you have the thought process of TO, where we want excellence, we promote excellence, and we expect excellence, and you pair that with promoting the arts in a way that promotes Freemasonry, you're not going to have a movement, you're going to have a renaissance. And we need that in Freemasonry right now. And this is the perfect time to do it, too, because it's starting to move. Might not happen in our generation, but it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. As we were just discussing before, people my age, they're expecting something when they come into the lodge. And if they don't get it, they're going to leave.
Right.
And if you get it, they're going to be hooked. And, in ancient New York, we tell the people coming in, we expect stuff from you. And oddly enough, you would think that would scare people away, and it doesn't. The people who come in and decide to go through the degrees are members of our lodge, and they're there. They're volunteering to help. They got ideas. They're passionate. We've had it out a couple of times in the lodge, and it's perfect. That's what it's supposed to be.
Right. So in promoting the arts, there's a lot of different ways that lodges can do that. We were talking yesterday. Not only can you buy art for your lodge, which is a wonderful way.
It's a great way to do it.
We love that. That's the best way right there. Buy some of Ryan's stuff and put it in your lodge. But in addition to that, you can have Masonic education programs on all versions of the arts, not just artists, but also music or anything else. You don't have to have Masonic artists necessarily to come in, since there's only a few of you. You mentioned going to like the local high school or the local college that have art departments and doing something in conjunction with them, whether it's have an art contest or give them a scholarship or you just have some of them come speak to your lodge. You can always dispense with labor or do it after have the meeting after the program after the meeting. There's however your jurisdiction works. Get them in there and get them talking about art, and those are all ways to promote it. You mentioned musicians also doing like chamber music or
I mean, one of the reasons I think that there's not a lot of Masonic artists in the world right now is because we don't talk about art and we don't promote art. By purchasing art, by displaying art, by hiring artists to do stuff, you're not only just I'm using the A word again, you're advertising Freemasonry, but you're advertising excellence. There's still that social thought process that the promotion of the arts makes you elite. And what I said in my topic was, music, for example. We'll get away from art for a second. So music has always been an intricate part of Freemasonry. A lot of people play music in lodge. Either you have an organist or you play something on the radio. That's fantastic. But instead of playing something on the radio, bring in someone to play music in your lodge. Bring someone in who knows Mozart, knows a piece of Mozart. Brother Mozart, and explain to them and then we have you do this because he was a Mason and he put Masonic stuff into his work. And what that does is it not only makes your lodge better because you're getting this live performance of an artwork, but you're also exposing Masonry to the artists and showing that it's important. And if you tell an artist that there's an organization out there that promotes excellence and loves art, they're going to want to join it.
Yeah, and not every lodge can pull this off. Some of them are, or have the grumpy old guys or their membership's just not ready for it. But certainly all you guys that are listening that are TO guys or borderline TO guys like yours is, undercover TO guys, don't call themselves TO.
I'm going to get in so much trouble for that.
That have observant practices. Y'all can pull it off.
Absolutely.
And invite, the guys that can't pull it off in their lodge, invite them to come to yours.
Yeah, there's ways to get, the old guys involved too. I'm sure they all have grandkids, and I'm sure, 10% of those grandkids have someone who plays an instrument.
That's right.
You want to get him back in the lodge? Have his grandson play something in lodge.
It's good stuff.
He'll be there.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon us as Masons to push this and promote it and make it part of our practices.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's circle back and talk about we got away from your art somehow. We're having trouble staying on track here.
I'm just pushing.
I want you to talk. If nothing else, I want you to talk about the Codex series and anything else you want.
All right, my Codex series.
Because I have them and I love them.
A lot of people have them as of yesterday.
And our Grandmaster has them hanging in his house.
Yeah,
too.
that's pretty cool. So when I was given the title, the position of senior deacon in New Hampshire, senior deacon does a middle chamber lecture. I've heard that's pretty common. So I started learning it, and I'm reading it, and I'm just like, oh, there's a lot here. So when I was in Italy, one of my teachers told me, if you want to be good, have a codex of your own, because we had seen Da Vinci's codexes, and he was telling me, for those who don't know, a codex is like a notebook, but it's a personal notebook. It's kind of like your sketch pad of figuring stuff out. So, if you have a codex as an artist and just put notes in it, and it's not pretty, you're not trying to sell it. It's just for you. But if you're trying to figure something out, like, even if it's stuff that's common knowledge, like I have a page in my codex that's all about arches, like how you get those curves. I know how it was done, but I drew it out, and I used the compass, and I traced all my lines so I knew where my compass points were, and it makes you understand it better. It's like learning a foreign language. I'm teaching myself Italian again right now. If you write it out, you get it faster because you're learning it on multiple levels. So codexes have always been very important. Always, of course, you can think of Da Vinci. A lot of codexes were destroyed upon the artist's deaths. Michelangelo, everything was burnt, and that was his wish. It was his knowledge and his alone. But with the popularity of like Da Vinci's codexes, I always kind of wanted to do something like that.
Tell them what it is, Ryan. It's almost like it looks almost like scribbles, or like it's not complete art. It's like where they took like their
there's no rhyme or reason to it.
It may have a picture of an arch with like little notes, personal notes, and then it's got a picture of a wheel. You had a picture of like some gears going together he drew, and so it's
he'd have something.
It's like scribbles, doodles,
doodles sort of. With notes, basically. Yeah. So I decided I wanted to do it with the middle chamber lecture because I was writing down notes as I was going. I'm like, all right, I can do something like this. So I had this idea of doing a professional looking codex, which is an oxymoron. So I did a rough draft of a capital of a column, and I didn't put a lot of thought into it. It's not historically accurate. It's not the way it looked. It probably is very far from it, but it was a sketch. It was a sketch that incorporated the core concepts of the columns and the capitals.
It was speculative.
Yeah.
Not operative.
But
speculative, not operative.
Yeah.
Right.
So I put that together, and I did this little piece, and it was just a sketch of 2 columns with a bunch of notes on it that goes into the math of the columns and the proportions, and using Pigpen cipher, Freemason cipher, I put notes in it. So all my notes are coded, just like Da Vinci wrote in reverse. Other artists had codes. So I figured it would be fitting to use the Freemason code in it. So I did that, really liked it, showed it to a couple people, and they're like, you got to keep going. So next one I did was the stairway. So we've gone through the columns, and it's a narrative of the middle chamber lecture. So you start outside the columns, you go in, you talk about the stairway and what all those numbers mean, and then I ended up with geometry and drew some capitals of columns and stuff that went through the different kinds of orders of architecture, wrote something about geometry and what it means, and did this. I really like it. I did this square and compass with an I inside of it instead of the G, and I didn't take the G out because I was taking out the G. I had this idea of you're looking at the great lights in masonry, they should be looking back at you. It's a communicative relationship. So I thought having it look right back at you and you're staring it in the eye, it's staring you in the eye, would kind of symbolize that relationship you should have with them. So the Codex series went, I did them and people they wanted it. So I started selling, and up until this point I wasn't selling my art. I was just doing it for art's sake. And I started doing it, and I always look through my art history books. I got art history books in the bathroom at home. My wife's not too happy about that, but because they're not small. But I'm looking through codexes, and it led into the chapter led into other writings like illuminated documents, which are they're called illuminated because there's gold worked into it or other precious metals, and when the sun hit it, it really looks like it's glowing, it's illuminating. So I did a version of the codexes with gold in it too, just putting it in certain places, and it wowed myself. I was like, this is good. So I decided to sell them, and that's how I became a professional Masonic artist. People ate them up. So I did a limited edition of 100 of them. I've sold probably like a third of them so far. Talk about the illuminated ones a little bit, in the craftsmanship that goes into them and how you do that, because this isn't something you go buy off the shelf So skipping a couple of projects, I decided to do patents. So I did these patents that are printed, and then I add gold to them. But I really wanted to do original, one-of-a-kind illuminated documents like they did 1,000 years ago. So the way that's done is, and I don't use the exact same materials because I let some people do some work for me. But there's a place in New York State that I get my vellum from, which is very, very thin calf skin, treated to a manuscript finish. and then everything's done by hand. So and I have horrible handwriting. It's embarrassing, but teaching myself how to do calligraphy. And I won't use the cheat word, but I use a computer to help me space things out. Just so I'm a beginner, and it's very expensive to make one of these. So I use a computer to help me lay out what I'm going to do, and then I do everything by hand. I don't trace it, but I use it as like spacing, just so I don't run off the page, because that would be pretty embarrassing. So I do everything by hand. I mix all the inks by hand. You can buy liquid pigment. Usually in the Middle Ages it was powdered and it grinded itself, but I don't have the time, nor do I want to do that. So I buy liquid pigment and mix it with ink and do each color individually. So there's no real blending with ink.
So they're very labor intensive.
Very much. It takes me about a month and a half to do each one.
Wow.
And
relatively cheap.
Yeah, I keep it cheap. People don't realize the cost of it. I sell them for $700 right now. Prices of vellum and stuff are going up, so unfortunately I'm probably going to have to raise my prices a little bit in the coming months. But what really gets it is I use pure gold. I get it from a store in California, which gets the gold from France. They have the best gold leaf. And the way you do it is you put this very, very thin layer of glue down, and you hammer the gold in. You put the gold down loosely, and then I have this little stamp thing, and I just hammer it into the vellum, and you get these wonderful geometric patterns that go around it. And when the light hits it, it's incredible. So
this is something that your great grandchildren would keep forever. This is something that's going to last. This isn't. Yeah. I saw that you had done a portrait of the Grand Master of Arkansas.
Yeah, Jared Atkinson.
So you do portraits for Grand Masters? I
just started. I've never painted a portrait in my life. I think actually I've done two. One of a friend of mine who lives up in Canada, and I did a self-portrait that I have no idea where it is, so it's probably lost. But I found out that there's Grand Lodges like Grand Lodge of Massachusetts that does a portrait of every Grand Master, and you go do a tour of the building. It's awesome. It's like an art gallery. Mm-hmm. So I found out that artists can make us to be a little selfish. Artists can make a good amount of money doing them. So I decided, maybe it's time for me to learn, because my ultimate goal would be to do this full time. I'm not near there at all right now, but.
And he was pleased with his.
Yeah, he loves it. It's sitting at home drying, and I'm going to ship it this week.
Very good.
But it was my first one. I hope it's the worst one I ever do, because. I
thought it looked great.
Yeah, I think it looked great too, but it's a learning experience. So.
Okay, so. I'm going to tell you what Curry Pendleton is a member of our lodge last night. Mm-hmm. And we were walking out after your presentation, and you had sold some of your pictures and stuff. And we were walking out, and he said, Ben, we need to buy as much of Ryan's stuff as we can now, because he's just going to get more and more famous, and this is going to get more and more expensive. I think he's exactly right. So I've got some of Ryan's stuff. We're going to talk in a little bit about what I'm going to buy before you leave here. But I think the lesson in this is, Ryan is an artist on the ascension, and and Masonic art is going to do nothing but ascend, and now's the time. And I think we're going to run out of here in just a second, Sean. We're going to give Ryan just a chance to talk about how we can contact him. When we put this up, can we put his contact information on there also?
Sure can.
For his Facebook page and his website. I guess you have prices on your website?
Yeah. My website's ryanjflynn.com. I have the stuff that's pre-printed there, and I do commissions. I highly recommend commissions, not just because they cost a little bit more, but the idea of doing something special for your lodge or for a member that's one of a kind, and it really becomes not just a gift for that person, but it becomes a gift for their lodge. So if you do a portrait of someone who's dedicated their life to your lodge and hang it in your lodge, right. It doesn't have to be for me. I'm not saying I would prefer it, don't get me wrong, but if you do something like that and you have that thought process, you're not just giving a gift to that person, you're giving that gift to the lodge and every member of the lodge that's going to come after you. That's the power of Masonic art.
For generations.
Generations upon generations. And, maybe 50 years from now, who's that? Why do you have a portrait of him? Because this is what he did for this lodge. And, maybe if you do it, you'll have one too.
Most of us mere mortals are just not going to leave that much of a legacy behind.
I disagree.
Well, maybe for a while, but, not forever. I mean, at some point, the things that you do, just kind of fade away. But there are some things that we can do that'll stay around for a long time, and Masonic art is one of them. If you can somehow commission a piece, or your lodge can commission a piece, and it's around for a couple hundred years, then that's something that's going to really stick with you, right? All right, well, we really appreciate you being here with us today. Please follow the links that Sean's going to provide, or go to find Ryan on Facebook, and promote arts in your lodge. Find a way to make that happen. If you want Ryan to come speak to you at your lodge, he's looking forward to spending many airplane flights flying all around the country now that we're fixing to make him famous here.
If I eat like I did here, I'll be there.
That's right. I'm not sure how his family feels about that.
We'll talk about that later.
But, this is really good stuff. It's an incipient part of, again, the TO movement and hopefully the artist movement within Freemasonry. We're glad that we got in on the ground level of this thing, and thank you again for coming.
I couldn't have been happier to have been here. Thank you again for making me a member of Sophia.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
All right. How about that?
All right.
We're out.
Yeah. Is that Gangster's Paradise? Amish Paradise.